NFC East, Eagles, Zach Baun, again.
Have to.
They need to resign him. I think you'd want to resign there.
But it's
not for $27 million. It ain't
for a guy like Zach Baun, who experienced a resurgence under Vic Fangio in that new position that he's playing, off-ball linebacker, having an opportunity to be really the centerpiece of that defense, the core of that defense. You would think a guy like that would have a long-term vision, but at the same time, as a player, you want to get yours strike when the iron's hot, so to speak. So for Zach Baun, I hope he gets everything he is due, because he didn't have that success in New Orleans, obviously a new player in Philadelphia.
I honestly think the more likely candidate, so they put Zach Baun. I think Milton Williams is a more likely candidate. He's 26 years old. This is the first time he's hitting free agency. He had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl. We saw basically how good he was as a pass rusher down the stretch.
Said he wants a raise.
It's $23.5 million. It's a lot cheaper than off-ball linebacker. It's a lot cheaper than wide receiver. It's a lot cheaper than offensive
It's a lot
line.
more than he's making.
And it's a lot more than he's making. But he's a guy that even at that number, that's too low. He will get more than that, I think, if he hits free agency. So that's your most likely candidate, in my opinion. Is it going to happen? We'll see. Commanders, no one really. Cowboys, Osa Odigizua is a potential candidate, defensive tackle. Kind of gets lost in that Dallas defense in the conversation, because obviously Micah Parsons commands so many headlines, but dude's been pretty darn good as a pass rusher. This past year, 60 pressures for the Dallas defense. Never came off the field, 859 snaps. Productive player, still young, 26 years old. And for the Dallas Cowboys, the thing is, I don't think they have the space to keep him, though. This is one where, yeah, it sounds great to keep him. Sounds great to put a franchise tag on him if he's not agreeing to a deal. But I don't know if you can fit that on your cap this year, unfortunately.
Osa Odigizua. Because as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, Cowboys are $4.5 million over the cap. They obviously need to get a deal done with Micah Parsons as well, even though he's not hitting free agency. They cannot let that guy walk out the door. So need to make some cap magic. Parking a cool $23.5 million on your cap this year just does not seem feasible with where they're at as a franchise. So I think he's going to hit free agency. Next one, Giants, nothing. NFC North, Lions, no one. Vikings, Sam Darnold. This one's interesting. Yep.
Because $41.3 million is objectively less than top of the market. I think it's objectively more than I'd be willing to pay Sam Darnold.
What is the top quarterback going to make in this market?
I mean, like if you were just a free agent hitting,
because we can
say if Trevor Lawrence hit free agency this year and he never signed an extension, or Jordan Love, they would on the open market get over $60 million a year.
So
it's 2/3 of the top.
Going into the dismantling of the Vikings at the end of the year, that Sam Darnold was not going to be a top dollar quarterback re-signing.
Yeah.
After the dismantling, the number dropped even further down. It plummeted down. Mm. Do you think that plummet ends up at around 40, where you're talking about with that?
I think it's still less. I think
you think 45 is what he would command.
I think he's clearly not going to be on the Vikings next year also. I think they quite clearly want to go J.J. McCarthy after how their season ended. It's hard not to. When you fumble the bag as hard as he did in the 2 biggest games, you just have to say that, fool me once,
for your time.
Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You can't get fooled by Sam Darnold
again.
Old
saying down here in Texas, we say, you fool me once, shame on me. Fool me again. Well, you don't fool me again. Okay?
So the Vikings, I don't think, can question Adolfo, the GM. I don't think he's going to get fooled again, even though they have $55.5 million cap space. They have a ton of space to play.
Pick up the dribble where they left off with J.J. McCarthy next year. That would be so impressive.
The only interesting thing about a franchise tag to me is, what would a tag and trade command on the open market? Could you remember when Alex Smith got traded, he got like a second in return.
So tag Sam Darnold for the $40 million
yes,
and then trade him to somebody
who will then negotiate to get a new deal with him. That would probably be less than the $40 million, but it would have more guaranteed, because it'd be like 3 years, 100, 70 of that's guaranteed or whatever. Because you're basically saying you're going to be my starting quarterback for the next 3 years, and then we'll go from there. It's a possibility. I don't know. I think you would have to almost, if you're the Vikings, you almost have to have a deal in place before you. But Sam Darnold, with you look at the state of the quarterback position, he will be in demand. Someone will tab him to be their starter next year, right or wrong, just because he played well enough to do so. Now, did he play well
on tape? We put the other stuff on tape too. And one thing I want to point out to people who are listening, Mike is great at this stuff. This is the part of the season where I've usually thrown my phone in one of those Faraday bags.
Yeah, you were on the coast already.
I was
surfing.
Yeah, I was boogie board. I was sponging at the wedge in Newport Beach, not paying attention to any of this stuff. And even when I was in the building during the season, we're not concerned. The only time I think about contracts is if we're sitting in the cafeteria and the TV says Khalil Mack inks new $160 million deal, and I look at him and I'm like, hey, dinner's on you tonight, bud. Outside of that, we don't pay attention to contracts. We don't pay attention to franchise tags. None of that stuff, because rule number one in the league is stay out of one another's pockets, unless you're congratulating somebody. So this is all new to me. It's unbelievable the stuff I'm going to learn here this offseason, being with you. You know, transition tags, franchise and trade, this shit. I didn't even know this was an option. And I'm sure there's a number of people upstairs in certain buildings that don't know their options either.
Dude, you would be surprised at how bad some teams are at just playing this game, which is thinking about all the potentials. Like, and especially the one I keep saying is the compensatory pick.
Oh, yeah.
How many teams just like that doesn't factor in? The New York Giants last year.
You're talking about the Chiefs, like Trey Smith getting
getting a compensatory pick. You'll get a third for Trey Smith if you don't sign guys yourself. So how it basically works, compensatory, and we'll do a whole show on all this stuff at some point. But if you have more guys walk out your door that get signed elsewhere than come in, you will get compensatory picks.
You get rewarded in draft picks.
Correct. And guys that got cut, though, from the previous stop don't factor into the compensatory pick formula. It's just guys who hit free agency on your team versus guys who hit free agency on the other team. That's why the Ravens at the end of the year, when we said they signed Deontay Johnson back, but just told him not to come in the playoffs, because they will be the team then that gets the compensatory pick for Deontay Johnson.
But if he showed up and was on the roster, then they wouldn't have gotten it.
No. If he just was, just the Texans cut him because they didn't want him in the locker room.
Yep.
The Texans could have gotten a compensatory pick back from him. So again, people may not sign Deontay Johnson. But I mentioned that because the Giants, when they let Saquon Barkley walk, they had a few free agents, big free agents leave, Xavier McKinney as well. They went out and signed, who's the quarterback that they signed from Missouri? Drew Lock. Yep. They went out and signed Drew Lock, which negated the compensatory pick that they were going to get.
See, that's insanity.
You signed Drew Lock to negate, I think it would have been a 4th round pick for them. That is just, if your team's doing that, and again, you are not doing this correctly. You are not building your team on. And falls on Joe Shane. That's just horrible business to do that. There's no way, shape, or form that you should be giving up a 4th round pick for 1 year of freaking Drew Lock. Sorry, off my soapbox. But yeah, to the point.
That's real.
Yes, it's real. To my point, some teams aren't thinking about this stuff the way they should be. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're here discussing it.
Who's the best team at it?
Ravens. Ravens have had by far and away the most compensatory picks since the start. They do things like sign Deontay Johnson, knowing he could get a compensatory pick. They do things like sign guys who are cut in free agency to basically fill out their roster in free agency, because those guys won't factor into compensatory picks. So if they lose anyone, they're getting picked for them.
The way I understand it is you are rewarded for distributing talent around the league.
Yes, it's meant as, and rightfully so, to be like a way of saying, when the advent of free agency, people were losing great players, and they're like, well, we're just SOL, that a guy just leaves, walks out our door. They did it as a way of saying, like, hey, if you lose too many good players, you're basically to help you rebuild that roster. And I like it. It's a good way for parity in the NFL, but teams that don't use it, a lot of teams don't, you are just losing out on potentially good players, guys that'll fill out your roster. So back to potential franchise tag candidates. NFC South, no one in the entire division. NFC West, Rams, article has Alaric Jackson. I would be surprised. He was fine. I don't think Alaric Jackson is commanding a ton in free agency. He is about mid-level average NFL offensive tackle. Now, a lot of teams will pay a lot for average. So it's potentially is 26 years old, but
They're not all Lane Johnson, Penei Sewell.
Yeah, true.
And the fall off is a lot.
Mm-hmm. So he's definitely a candidate. Again, that one would not surprise me. Seahawks, Cardinals, 49ers, no one.
Will Hernandez is a free agent now.
Mm-hmm. He was hurt last year.
I don't think he ends up in Arizona, but he could go somewhere like Chicago, maybe. I don't know.
Oof.
I'm just thinking about a guy who's a good pass protector. I like Will
I'd like him in Chicago. Guy is built.
He's a vet. You need vets.
Guy is just wide.
Yes.
That man is.
I like wide guards, bro. I like them wide. The wider, the better. First time I saw Quentin Nelson.
Oh, my God.
Son, what have you done to your back?
He has that. You know how in like NCAA 14, when you created a player or whatever, they were just wide. Like they just had like this wide square.
Yep.
That's what he looks like.
Just wide ass, wide back, wide neck, wide head.
It's like, damn, that guy could not have been much else.
But Will Hernandez is like that.
A bouncer. Yeah, Will Hernandez is.